Hey everyone! Have you ever gotten to the bottom of a page, or maybe even a whole chapter of a book, and then you stop and realize you have absolutely no idea what you just read? Well, you are not alone. Today, we're going to dive into a really cool method designed to fix that exact problem. It's called KQCI, and it's all about turning reading from a passive chore into an active, exciting way of thinking. This is the big question, isn't it? It's something teachers and parents are talking about everywhere. With our phones buzzing, notifications popping up, and that endless social media scroll, the ability to just sink into a text and really focus feels like a superpower. And for a lot of students, it's a power they feel like they're losing. And here's a great way to think about it. Deep, focused reading is like a muscle. And just like any muscle, if you don't use it, it gets weaker. Our modern world, with all its quick bites of information, just isn't giving that muscle the workout it needs. So what happens? Our ability to really concentrate and pull meaning from complex ideas starts to fade. And that brings us to the core of the modern reading problem. For so many students, reading has gone from being this amazing source of discovery to just another item on their to-do list. I mean, if you're an educator, you see this every day, right? Attention spans feel shorter, and that crucial skill of reading between the lines, it's just not as strong. It makes the whole thing feel frustrating and, honestly, totally disconnected from their actual lives. So, what do we do about it? Well, the solution starts with a pretty big shift in how we think about reading in the first place. What if the goal wasn't just to finish the book? What if the real goal, the new goal, was self-discovery? What if we started using texts as a tool to understand ourselves and the world a little bit better? This quote just nails it. It's not about the destination of finishing the book. It's about the journey. It's about giving students a chance to actually practice thinking, to wrestle with an idea, to make connections that are their own. That's where the magic, the real learning, actually happens. So the first big goal of this method is super straightforward: recover literacy. This is all about getting those reading muscles back in shape. Through some really targeted exercises, like finding the main point or asking good questions, students start to reactivate that ability to focus and to analyze. They're rebuilding that core strength. Now, the second aim, this one goes a little deeper. It's all about fostering self-discovery. This method actually pushes students to connect what they're reading to their own life, their own memories, their own feelings. The text suddenly becomes a kind of mirror where they can see parts of themselves reflected in the stories and ideas on the page. And finally, the third aim is to build character. This isn't just about, what happens in the plot. It's about understanding the people in the story. Students learn to spot virtues, things like courage or perseverance or integrity, in the characters, and then they get to think about how they can bring those same qualities into their own lives. Okay, so we get the big idea, the philosophy behind it all, but how does this actually work? What do you do? Well, the KQSCI method is basically a simple but really powerful four-step toolkit. It's designed to guide you from just looking at the words on the page right into the heart of what it all means. And here they are, the four steps. You got K for key point, Q for question, C for character, and I for idea. See how each one builds on the last? It creates this really clear path that takes you from reading to thinking and then all the way to putting it into action in the real world. So let's break each one down.
All right, first up, K is for key point. Think of this as the warm-up, the first set in your workout. The whole goal here is to train students to cut through all the extra words and find the single, most important message the author is trying to get across. It's about learning to spot the core of the idea.
Let's look at a real example. So you take this little story about Thomas Edison. Instead of trying to remember every single detail, a student using this method just pulls out 3 essential keywords: Edison, failure, and perseverance. Boom, just like that. A whole paragraph becomes a simple, powerful concept you can actually remember. So once you've got that key point, the next step is Q for question. And this is where things get really interesting. This is where you move from just taking in facts to actually engaging with the ideas. It's about going from, okay, what happened, to so what? Why does any of this matter? And this chart just shows the difference so clearly. A fact-finding question is, how many times did Edison fail? A meaning-seeking question is, what can I learn from Edison's attitude toward failure? See the difference? One's a trivia question. The other is a life question. KQCI is all about learning how to ask those life questions. All right, next we've got C for character. This step is all about looking for the human element in the story.
You start to identify the values and the virtues that the people in the text are showing you through what they do and the choices they make.
So if we go back to that Edison story, it's pretty easy to spot perseverance, right? And passion, for sure. By actually giving these virtues a name, students start to build this vocabulary for understanding people, which of course helps them understand themselves and everyone around them so much better. And that brings us to the final and maybe the most important step of all. I is for idea. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where you take everything you just figured out, from the key point, the questions, the character, and you turn it into a real, actual idea for your own life. Reading isn't just homework anymore, it's a spark for personal change. Now, for a method like this to really work, it's not just the student who has to change. The teacher's role has to change too. The teacher kind of evolves from that traditional instructor at the front of the room to more of a thinking coach, a mentor who's on the sidelines.
So check this out. Let's say a student says, I don't know, everything seems important. We've all been there, right? The old instructor model might be to just tell them the answer. But the coach, the mentor, asks a guiding question like, okay, but what's the one sentence the author really truly wants you to remember? It's about prompting them, not telling them. It's about helping the student find the answer for themselves.
So as we start to pull this all together, let's just zoom out to the big picture again. The KQIC method, it's not just another reading strategy to memorize. It's a complete reimagining of what reading is even for. It's about tapping into the power of consistent thinking practice. And honestly, that little shift in words is everything. We're moving away from this idea of a passive reading activity, something you just have to check off your list, and moving toward an active thinking practice, which is something that helps you grow and discover and build who you are.
So let's do a quick recap. First, the whole goal of reading changes from just getting it done to actual self-discovery. Second, KQCI gives you a super clear 4-step path to get there. Third, the teacher's role shifts to being a supportive mentor. And maybe most importantly, it's these small, everyday acts of thinking practice that rebuild those deep reading skills over time.
I'll leave you with this one last thought to chew on. In a world where you can look up any fact in about 2 seconds, maybe the real value of reading has changed. What if its greatest purpose isn't to give us answers, but to help us ask better questions about the world and about ourselves? Thanks so much for tuning in.